And today what I would like to talk about is a lesson that we might learn from October 7. And for those who are unfamiliar with this picture, this is Noah Gamani, one of the hostages that was taken hostage on October 7. And October 7 for me began at 6:29 a.m. with a large series sounds of bangs. We live in the southern part of Israel, just at the Gaza Strip, the north of the Gaza Strip. And when we learned that hundreds of Nukhba terrorists invades Israel and get into villages, the men of our village went down to the gate to defend against this raid. But one of my neighbor needed to do the exact opposite of staying in the safe place of our village. She was called to the Barzilai hospital in Ashkelon to help in the emergency room. And what's going to happen in that emergency room on October 7 is hell on earth. Hundreds of injuries, hundreds of deceased people from the Nova Festival, from Sderot city, from bases around Gaza, hell on earth. And what she's going to witness is unimaginable. No one can write such a script. And I saw her on October 8 when I was guarding the gate of the village, and sadly I welcomed her pointing a gun. That was the atmosphere. And I saw her sitting on the passenger seat. And when she came closer, the first thing that I saw is that my neighbor is not there. It's blank, as if the soul was taken hostage. But when she came closer, what I also saw is a wow moment. I told to myself, she aged a decade. That was an amazing sensation. I look at her and she aged a decade. So the question that I would like to ask today is whether this phenomena that I'm actually seeing is scientifically plausible. Does collective trauma, the experience of such a harsh experiences that Israeli society had in the past 2 years, can actually age us, make us older than we are? And if so, to who would it happen and to who it would not? So often when we talk about age, we usually talk about the chronological age in which we celebrate birthdays. So for example, one of my daughters, Yuval, was born on September 29, 2006, and exactly on the date, 4 years later, she was at the age of 4. And exactly 8 years later, she was celebrating her bat mitzvah, and exactly to the day, 7 years later, she celebrated her 19th birthday. That was 1 month ago. But it turns out that that's not our actual age. It's not our biological age. The biological of this machine that would predict mortality, illnesses, age-related illnesses such as cancer, and age-related marks such as wrinkles, lack of hair, white hair. I have check every box. And what we do know to do now, as in the previous talk, is get inside into the body to know our actual biological age, the age of our machine. And we can equivalent that to buying a new car, equivalent to us being born. Everything ticks, it's clean without any leaks, it's new, the motor runs and roars and roars, awesome car. But then when you begin driving on it, and especially giving it to your kids, it begins to break down. Scars become filthy, things begin to break, the motor sounds as snoring sound, as happened to us men at older ages. And it happens also from within. We get older, and what changes and predicts this biological age is, as was told, the methylation age. It happens in the epigenetic layer, the layer that governs the activation of genes. And when it begins to have mistakes, then we become older. Now, fortunately, we began a large longitudinal study in Israel a few years before October 7, and then, of course, we came back after October 7. And because we know the time difference, we can now actually scientifically calculate whether October 7 accelerated our age, caused us to become older in response to this collective trauma. Now, let's take an example. But before that, an anecdote. Before we had participants, I tried it on myself to look what is my epigenetic age. And to summarize the result, I would say, dead men walking. Never try it on yourself. It's not pleasant. So let's see what happened to our participants, and begin with two case studies. So one of them is this participant. Let's call him in initial RTS. He was 29 in October 7. He was enlisted in an emergency call known as Tzav 8 to draft in the army. He is a fighter in the Navy. He lost friends in the fights. Some other friends got injured. One family member was evacuated, and he perceived October 7 as a day of very dangerous to himself and people around him. Another participant of ours, let's name him AG, he was 25 on October 7. He was also enlisted in Tzav 8. He fought in the artillery battalion, was in Gaza and Lebanon for quite a long time, also lost friends in the fight, and also perceived October 7 as a very dangerous day to himself and people around him. So objectively, quite equivalent experiences. But when we dove into the cells of these participants, we found something entirely different. So what happened to RTS was striking, because he was on October 7, 29. When it's ended, he was 10 years older biologically. He aged a decade, 9 years and 7 months to be exact. AG, in comparison, something entirely different happened. He was 25 on October 7. In the end, he was of the few that even become biologically younger. He ended October 7 at the age of 21. How come these individual differences? What can explain these individual differences? Because before we would get to that, let's see what happened to the Israeli population according to our study. So on average, what happened to Israelis in response to October 7? A very harsh collective trauma. Yes, it caused us to be older by an average of 1 year and 3 months. So for example, if on October 7, 2023, I was 48, and now 2 years later, chronologically, I'm 50, on average, I'm actually not 50. I'm 51 and 3 months. And as additional anecdote, if there are about 8 million Israeli Jews in Israel that suffer this collective events, saw them, experienced them, then, and if each one lost 1 year at 3 months, it's about 10 million years that we lost. And if on average a person lived about, in Israel, 82 years, it's equivalent to losing 1,200 people, lives. And on October 7, and that's the anecdote, we actually lost 1,200 people, but 2 years until today, we lost additional years equivalent to the life of 1,200 people. So how can I explain these individual differences in the response to the collective trauma? One, his age was highly accelerated, he became older, and one did not. And the first thought that we had, destiny. It's destiny, but not destiny in respect to the spiritual world, but destiny in respect to genetics. Because each one of us inherit genes that would also relate to the innate expression of our stress response. So our initial logic was, if you are born with a highly expressed stress response, then the harsh events of October 7 would be so overwhelming that you would be teared from inside and become older. How can we test that? So if we would get to a bit more specifics, so one part that ends a stress response in our body is the adrenal cortex, the yellow segment above our kidneys. It ends an axis known as the HPA, the A for the adrenal cortex. And if we would just increase what happens there, is a series of very complex processes, but at the end it secreted cortisol into the bloodstream, and in the end it helps to secrete glucose that gives us energy. And all of these processes are controlled by dozens of genes. What we have developed in the lab is the ability to give one score known as EPS, E for expression-based, meaning it's the genetics, your genetic code, that relates to the expression of this module on the HPA axis. And P means that it's based on polygenic. All of the genes in this process and the expression is inside the adrenal cortex. So we know by one score to what extent your destiny is to have highly expressed stress response. And now we can test the hypothesis. And to test that, we can do something very simple. We can do an association. So on the x-axis, we can locate the extent that by genetic your stress response is highly expressive. And on the y-axis, we can put the age acceleration. Low values mean that your age did not change, or you even became younger. And higher value means that you lost years, you became older. And when we created this association, we found absolutely nothing. So the association of 0.05 means technically zero, nothing. But we had a hunch that there should be something there. If you, by your destiny of the genes, supposed to be highly expressed, then how come you see these events of October 7 and do not break down? So our hunch was that this association is hidden behind a risk factor. And that's exactly what we have found. We have found for a subpopulation that our hypothesis is supported. The higher the genetic expression of the stress response, the older you became in response to October 7. So who are these people that broke down if their stress response was highly expressive? They had two traits. So they were either high on attachment anxiety, meaning people who worry about getting help, who only know how to regulate emotion with the help of others. They do not know how to regulate emotion by themselves, not effectively. They do not know how to regulate, even with others, their emotion effectively. And they kind of have a catastrophic way of thinking. On October 7, if their stress response by their genetic were highly expressed, they were overwhelmed by the sensation, broke down, and became biologically older. A second group was a group with high attachment avoidance. Often they put themselves as a distance from others physically and emotionally. They know how to regulate emotions by themselves, but not by the aid of others. They do not know how to reach out and get help. On October 7, those defenses broke down and they became older if their stress response by genetic was more expressed. But there was a group that the association was exactly the opposite. Meaning a group that if they were born with highly expressed stress response, they actually on October 7 performed the best, and they did not age or even became younger in response. And again, who is that group? So that group is a group with low attachment anxiety and low attachment avoidance, and we would call them the attachment security group. These people trust themselves, the world, and people around them. They know how to reach out for help and know how to get help. But this teaches us something important about genetics and about stress. Stress, when you are born highly stressed, crying and so on, that's not a curse. It could be a blessing because, and that teaches us something about resilience. Resilience is not built on the beach drinking Mai Tai without any challenges. It's only built from challenges and overcoming them. So when you are highly expressed from birth, you actually had more opportunities to learn about resilience, to know how to relax yourself if you had relationship of security, meaning if other people were there to help you, to calm you. And then you reached October 7 after thousands of these interactions, being stressed, being calm, being stressed, being calm, and then you know how to react in times of peril. And you're shown in October 7. And the remaining question is technically how? How these two associate? Meaning how the ability to ask for help and get help and perceive that you are getting help is technically related to this age acceleration or the lack thereof. How do we know? How does it work? So to do that, what we done is again dive into the bodies of our participants, not in a kinky way, and appraise the expression of many systems or many compounds. It was, for example, the affiliation system governed by oxytocin, or the reward system or motivation system, such as dopamine of wanting and opioids of liking, or the stress responses, such as the HPA, or the fight and flight sympathetic system, and looked at the network of association, which is something that looks like this. But although it's complex, and although there are many associations, for example, the red ones are the stopping signs, or the green ones are the gas, this network has a starting point, which is the ability to ask and get help, that of attachment security, and it also has an ending, that of age acceleration. So what we need to do today, or what do we need to do, is just see the significant associations between the two. And what we have learned is two important lessons, not only on collective trauma, but I think on how Homo sapiens, us, work. Because what we have found is technically two things. So first, the ability to ask for help and get help was associated significantly with one main system. A system that we find it deep within the brain, in the hypothalamus. And this system is the system of oxytocin. The ability to ask and get help is associated with highly expressed oxytocin system. Behaviorally, what it means is that the ability to ask and get help is related to the behavior of proximity-seeking behavior. Seeking someone who is smarter, stronger than you in that situation, and might I add, nice looking. That's my wife and my daughter as actress. So at the end of this process, you are going to be locked within a social hug, a very defensive position for us Homo sapiens. And then the oxytocin expression is relating the network to the HPA axis. It happens within the region of this command center, the hypothalamus, when the oxytocin push on the brakes of the stress response. It's called the GABA receptors. Also, alcohol works on it. This is one reason why we drink to manage the stress. And then behaviorally, what would happen is the reduction of stress. The stress reduces within this social hug. And this is enough to stop the age acceleration. But it's not the end of the story. There is one additional piece. Because the oxytocin system also relates to one additional system within our brain. And that's a system with the initial OP, and that's the opioids. In the brain is usually a connection between the hypothalamus and the nucleus accumbens, in which part of it are opioids. And we know the effects of two kinds. So, for example, morphine reduces pain. In our body, mental pain also associates with physical pain, and the ability to reduce physical and mental pain, the prognosis of the outcome, the psychiatric outcome, are much, much better. So this defensive hug not only relates to decrease of stress, but also to the ability to decrease pain sensation. And that's very good prediction to the future. But what opioid also does is increases a positive sensation. So in attachment, it would be called sense of security. And this pleasantness within the hug would means evolutionary that you are going to do that again and again, meaning defending your future. And also, lastly, the ability to increase pleasantness. We know that the one key symptom of depression, for example, is the inability to feel pleasure. And if you open this up, the ability to feel pleasure, it could counter processes such as depression and PTSD. So to summarize the outcome of October 7, or the lesson on October 7, October 7 is a very tragic day. But does it have to be in the personal level? Does it have to be a tragedy? Or could it be a turning point for something even positive? Well, it does not depend on your destiny in the genetic. It depends on who is around you. Because what we saw, something highly important, is the ability to know that there is something there in the social surrounding that would be there for me. And some people, and we saw that with poverty, put themselves at the side. It's our responsibility to be there for them. And that could be a very good beginning for the future. So I think with this hopeful note, I would like again to thank you for the invitation and for this conference.